Hi, everyone. I'm Taylor Combaluzier, a mining analyst at Red Cloud Securities. This session of our Oktoberfest Fall Mining Showcase will feature Sterling Metals. Sterling Metals holds a 100% interest in the Sail Pond Silver, Copper, Lead, Zinc project on the Great Northern Peninsula of Newfoundland. From the company, we have with us Mathew Wilson, who's the CEO. I'll note that if attendees have any questions throughout the presentation, to submit them using the Q&A link, and we'll get to them during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. And with that, I'll turn it right over to Matt to walk you through the story.
Thanks, Taylor. Am I good to go?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, great. Thanks. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us here. Excited to tell you about Sterling Metals. We think we're on something pretty special here as we uncover Canada's next high-grade silver deposit. Sorry, silver district. So forward-looking statement, which I'm sure no one's seen today. So look, just overview of the company. Our project is located in Newfoundland. You can see right there, that's one of our trench sites where we're focusing a lot of our drilling. That's a dirt road that runs throughout. Newfoundland is a tier 1 mining jurisdiction. It's a great place to work. We have easy access. We're 30 kilometers from an airport. This is a wonderful place to be. This company has a district scale potential. This is not one small deposit. We're talking about a 12-kilometer long polymetallic soil anomaly that is in line with geophysics and in line with really high grades and outcrop all along the entire 12-kilometer trend. Our first passes of drilling, we started drilling in June. The Maiden drill campaign, this is the first time this project's ever been drilled. And already we're seeing narrow but really high grades of massive to semi-massive sulfides, 1,550 grams silver, 6% copper, 2.5% antimony, 29% zinc, things that you understand how powerful of a system that this is to bring these grades to surface. And like any good company, would need a good management team to kind of push this forward. Our exploration team is headed by Kelly Malcolm, who's the VPX of Amex Exploration. You have Denny Laviolette on our advisory board, president of Newfound Gold. And myself, my background is I've spent 12 years investing and running junior mining companies. 6 years was spent on an investment fund and owned over hundreds of different junior mining companies. I spent about 5 years running mining exploration, and the company's raised about $7 million to date. The company will exit this year with about $3 million in cash and currently has, I think, an enterprise value of about 10 million. So as we go through this for a value proposition. So for some perspective of where we are, we're up in the very top of the Great Northern Peninsula in northwest Newfoundland. Our project is about, as I said, 30 kilometers away from the St. Anthony Airport. But what's great is we're only about a 45-minute drive from Roddickton, which is the closest town. And the ease of access is kind of explained really nicely by the way that the deposit was actually found, which was found at the end of 2016 by a local school principal, Tony Kearney, driving around with his son, prospecting or hunting, and looks to his left on one of these logging roads. It's easy to drive and sees big kind of weathered blue rock of copper in quartz vein. So chips that, thinks that it's a good thing, drives down to Springdale where the assay lab is, meets up with the guys from Altius Minerals and finds that there's 500 grams silver and 2.5% copper in this rock, and kind of everything from there was off to the races. So since then, at the end of 2016, there's about 4 million that's been spent, including our drilling this year, and we own 100% of this project. To give a perspective of the size and kind of the linear trend that we're working with here, the soil sampling that was done in 2017 and in 2020 by us shows this really distinct linear trend of high-grade silver, copper, and then lead, zinc, cadmium, and antimony. Looks kind of like a more densely packed version of the copper picture on the right. What's so interesting about this is that kind of distinct linear anomaly, and then the grades that we're seeing, which is up to 650 grams silver, 0.7% copper, and over 1% lead zinc in soils is pretty tremendous. And this soil sampling lines up really nicely with these outcrops that come out and samples from trenches. So from bottom to top, very similar style of mineralization, this quartz veining that carries really nice looking sulfides. At the bottom of in the south zone, we saw 4,500 grams silver, 15% copper. And in the top, while a little bit lower grade, we're still seeing the same kind of quartz veining that showed us 300 grams silver equivalent, 400 grams silver equivalent. So same kind of veining, 12-kilometer strike soils and outcrop to kind of go together. And then this matches up with geophysics, which I'll show you in a little bit. Prior to us going into the drilling program, we were looking at different project analogs, and PhD geologist who did our technical report did an isotope analysis on the project and a presentation to the Newfoundland Geological Survey, and said that this project is a direct analog to the silver districts in Idaho, the Coeur d'Alene Silver District in Idaho, the Kootenay region in BC, and the Keno Hill District in the Yukon. And looking at kind of the Keno Hill District, it just so matches up that the Keno Hill District, the western side of it, which produced 230 million ounces of silver when silver was $1 from 1913 to the year 2000, that matches up very well with our strike length, showing 12 kilometers. And just for this particular analog, the Keno Hill District was made up of these very densely packed, narrow quartz vein swarming kind of deposits. So deposits of 250 to 500,000 tons of ore that graded 20 to 50 ounces of silver per ton. So you're looking at 10 to 20 million ounces of silver production from only 500,000 tons of rock. In fact, the biggest mine on this trend was 2.7 million tons, which produced 100 million ounces of silver over that time frame. So when we went in drilling with this kind of project analog, we had this 12-kilometer strike. All we had were these surface anomalies to go off. And so what we did is we kind of drilled underneath the trenching, we drilled underneath the anomalies, and not quite, but if you think about across 12 kilometers at 500 meter spacing, we drilled these 16 holes from bottom to top. And truthfully, the 16 holes weren't that great, but we realized that what we were doing at the time was not in line with this new structural interpretation that we had just come up with. And so we had hit these sniffs, a half meter of 1,000 gram silver equivalent, a broader zone of 7 meters of 80 gram silver equivalent. And then we adjusted our orientation to understand what was going on in a different way. And then in our first hole that we got assays back for, we saw from the same hole, 11 meters from surface, well, from 3 meters of 70 gram silver equivalent, which had this 0.25 meter quartz vein that carried the high grades. We had 10 meters of 100 gram silver equivalent, 15 meters of 90 gram silver equivalent. So not mining grades, nothing that we're going to write home about in terms of starting a mine, but this is showing us that with the narrow intercepts that carried these really big grades in the sulfides and these broader zones of mineralization, you could see that this is really showing us that there's a big system that's pushing all of this to surface, as I think the deepest downhole depth here was about 120 meters on the 14.6 meter intercept. What that led us to was repositioning our drill collars, and what we ended up drilling very close by was 300 meters away in terms of a collar extension, was 0.34 meters of 1,572 gram silver and the big copper, zincs, antimony, lead, and gold grades that you see there. And this is drilled in massive sulfides, looking like the massive and semi-massive sulfides, looking like the grades that you're seeing above. But what we were also seeing is not just these huge sulfide kind of concentrations in these quartz veins, we're also seeing these brecciated zones in the host rock, in this dolostone that was finding itself at the highest point at this contact between an argillite and between the dolostone rock. So this brecciated zone in the host rock is showing us that there is some strong, very strong system that's pushing these sulfides into that host rock. So that, along with these really high grades of quartz veins, shows us that there can be multiple different types of mineralization that could all come together to give us something that's pretty exciting. And what gets us really going is that when we figured out this structural contact where we started drilling right along this bend and jog of the IP, that's showing you where the argillite and where that dolostone is meeting. And if you kind of take a look at this right here, that yellow rock there, that's the dolostone. And this is the flexure of the argillite, which is what we're hitting. And it's kind of creating this trap, this pipe of some sort. And you're seeing the highest grade and the most exciting stuff come up right where you're hitting into contact. And what's so interesting about that is that those first 16 holes weren't drilled into that at all. But as soon as we started drilling that, you're seeing the results that are coming. And then as we've put out in our press releases, we're actually visually seeing a lot more signs of mineralization as we kind of continue to push along that contact, both around hole 23 and then a down plunge as we continue to extend as that extends down to depth. And when we talk about this possibly being a district, and we think about that string of pearls analogy where you see multiple small deposits along that 12-kilometer strike, you have to look and say, look, well, we've sort of figured out that there's this contact down here that while you could either have a small pod perhaps, or you could have something that's larger when you go down plunge, you also want to see what's going on in the rest of the district. And so our next drill program will be focused very clearly on both extending what we hope to be a pretty exciting thing in the south zone, But also when you look at the north zone, there are these 5 targets alone along this 2 kilometers. And you'll see that these drill holes that we had right here, these were the holes that we drilled in that phase 1 program. And as you'll see, they're nowhere close to actually hitting these structural jogs that we're now interpreting to be what's the control of the system. This hole 10 here had some really small mineralization, which we released to date right in here. So you're still seeing some sniffs, kind of what we saw in the phase 1 in the south zone, but we just weren't close enough to hit it. So what we're really excited about is continuing to advance our understanding and show that this is not just one deposit near the bottom, but along that entire 12-kilometer trend, there are multiple different areas and pods that we could be seeing where you could see these quartz veins, these high-grade sulfides, and then also this brecciated zones within the dollar zone. So to talk about the team, obviously you need the capital markets understanding as well as the geology. The chairman of the company is Richard Patricio. He's the CEO and president of Mega Uranium. He's on the board of NextGen Uranium. He's been involved with billions of dollars of financings over the years and he's been the chairman for a while. Myself, we've gone over. Stephen Keith has 20 years of experience working in mining. He's done over $2 billion in financings and mergers. And Dennis Logan has been a CFO for about 25 years and investment banker prior. We rely very heavily on our advisory board and the consultants that we hire. We've brought consultants from SRK. The team from Mercator Geology is running the program on the ground, but leading the program for us is Kelly Malcolm, who's currently the VPX of MX Exploration, which is, I think, almost at about 200,000 meters in Quebec and running one of the most exciting gold discoveries in Canada. Denis Laviolette, president of Newfound Gold and chairman of Goldspot, is a very involved advisor. The Goldspot team has been terrific in terms of taking all of the data specifically from the last 4 years and will be, and then putting it together and giving us targets that led us to where we are today. And then also in terms of, they'll be able to take all of the geophysical data. We're going to do some downhole EM to see if we can identify some of the sulfide contacts and then put it all together to give us kind of a better idea of what's happening moving forward. And Mark Raguse, also on the advisory board. Mark, Denny, and I all worked together at some point in our life as well. Before this, Mark represents Altius Minerals. Altius is a 14% shareholder and has been an incredible help for us in Newfoundland as they've everything from permitting to understanding environmental requirements to kind of just how do you operate in Newfoundland, which drillers to find. They've made this program really easy such that we've been able to complete 8,500 meters of drilling, all the preliminary work and get to a point where we own 100% of this all within a year of getting the project. So looking at the capital structure of the company, been a tough market for metals in the last little bit, but company's in a really good position. The company has 48 million shares out, 40% institutional insider owned. We're going to end the year, I think after all is said and done, with about $3 million of cash, enough money to go do a drill program next year, kind of push forward on the company as we want. Options and warrants, those are at 45 cents, 52 cents, and 78. The majority of which actually expire at the end of the year next year in December. With an enterprise value of about, say 12, 11 million, I think this is a pretty good value proposition, especially considering this diversified metal exposure. While I do focus on the potential to define a major silver district similar to the Keno Hill district, it is really interesting, especially in a world where COVID and supply chain disruption is happening, to find 2 of the 36 strategic metals that Canada has made a big point of identifying, such as copper and antimony, which are so critical for electronics, the green revolution, and then also to find grades like that we're finding in zinc and silver. You just have the exposure to a series of metals that when you combine it with the fact that we're in a safe jurisdiction like Canada, we have access to roads, we have access to power, access to a town nearby, kind of checks a lot of the boxes that you would want to find when you're looking for a company with high upside, but a safe downside when you're going forward. So again, Newfoundland, we have 6,000 meters of assays still to come. So lots of news still to come. We think that what we're going to find as we go forward is really compelling. And yeah, thanks a lot for the time.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Matt. So we are essentially out of time. There's about 10 seconds left, so won't be able to get to any questions, but I think that was a great update for everybody. And thanks a lot for presenting Sterling Metals this afternoon.